So I came to Paris to learn French, and my French still sucks. Now, why did I come all the way to Paris to learn French from a traditional language class? If you saw my last video, you know that I am a diehard fan of self-teaching and comprehensible input. Well, first of all, I thought it would be fun. I've always wanted to go to a place for a long period of time, specifically to learn the language of the place. But also, there seems to be a rising movement against traditional language classes on language YouTube. I admit that I mostly bought into this when I started learning Spanish on my own. The logic was that if I took 2 classes of Spanish in high school and 1 class in college, and I didn't gain any level of proficiency, that must mean that classes don't work, right? But at the time, I wasn't actually interested in learning a language as a high school student, and I wasn't engaged in the learning process, and I didn't have the critical thought capacity to ask myself, is what I'm being taught actually effective? So now, as somebody who is very interested in learning languages, I had to go back and test the classroom method for myself. And I'm here to share my results and thoughts with you guys. So now I want to start you off with a conversation that I had with my friend in French. She learned French to a very high level, to give you a little snapshot of my level before the classroom started.
Tu enseignes le français avec ton école?
Oui.
Oh.
Yeah. J'ai commencé à apprendre le français à les élèves aux États-Unis, mais juste le niveau 1.
C'est quoi 3 niveaux?
Niveau 3?
3, I mean, 2 niveaux? C'est quoi?
Mon niveau, c'est
Ouais.
C2.
C'est 2.
Genre le final, quoi.
Les finales.
Ouais.
Il y a pas de français que tu peux apprendre.
Bah, ça va, mais...
Tu vas apprendre tout le français.
Kind of. Je peux toujours apprendre plus des choses, mais j'ai assez de français de parler avec n'importe quelle personne.
Vraiment, mon mentalité, c'est un peu différent. Est-ce que je pense que je vais apprendre pour toute ma vie. Comme je apprends l'anglais pour le reste de ma vie, je apprends plus long en anglais tous les jours. C'est la même chose en français et les autres langues, à mon avis.
Genre, ça va être un projet qui dure toute ta vie. C'est juste changer mon mentalité d'être obsédée par la langue, genre obsédée par la grammaire et juste genre aller à fond. Et ça, c'est vraiment genre comment j'ai appris.
J'ai vu essayer avec les courses parce que comme l'espagnol et les autres langues, je pense pas de la grammaire parce que j'ai c'est quoi le mot?
T'as peur.
T'as peur?
J'ai peur.
J'ai peur que je perde ma motivation.
Now let's talk about the class that I took. The class that I took was an in-person, 4-week intensive course that consisted of 20 3-hours-a-day lessons per week. Each lesson was either a grammar point, grammar exercises, oral production practice, breakdown of a written passage, or a breakdown of an oral passage. I also wanted to mention that I won't be mentioning the name of the exact school that I attended, because as you can tell by the types of lessons that I listed, it was the most typical traditional classroom learning that you could think of, which is exactly what I was trying to test. So that is a good thing. Instead, this video is about my progress and my thoughts on the effectiveness of language learning in a classroom, especially for myself, but hopefully you guys will gain some insight from it as well. Now, what was great about learning in a classroom? In the classroom, I felt that I got constant feedback as to where I was at in my process. I always knew if I had acquired something, because if the teacher asked me to use something and I couldn't use it, guess what? That means I didn't know it. If the teacher asked me to use a word or a grammar structure properly and I couldn't do it, guess what? That meant that I hadn't acquired it yet. The legitimacy of the lessons in a classroom setting. Now, I list this because when I'm learning on my own, sometimes I come across a phrase in a YouTube video or a TV show, and I wonder to myself, is that phrase something that just this person says? Is it a joke that I'll never hear again? Or is it a mistake that this person might have made when they're just speaking casually? You don't know as a learner. But in the classroom, you always know that the lesson that you're being taught is a legitimate structure. They're legitimate words that you know are frequently and commonly used in a language. And you generally know if they are a polite form of the phrase or a more crude form of the phrase. Okay, the next point is constant input. Now this is kind of a best of both worlds situation. I love comprehensible input. It's how I learned my first 8 months of learning French. But in the classroom setting, you are guaranteed to get, in my case, 3 hours of comprehensible input every day, about 3 hours. My class was taught entirely in French. We were taught grammar points and set structures and things like that, but these lessons were taught entirely in French. That is very, very nice. Now, let's talk about some negative aspects of classroom learning. The frustration. Like I mentioned in the positive section, sometimes the teacher asks you questions and you have to respond in French. That is frustrating, it's a little demoralizing, and you feel like a child, and it kind of sucks. It can be discouraging, but with enough mental fortitude, I guess, you can get over it. But when you just really can't push through it and say what you need to say, that is not a great feeling. It can leave you feeling stuck in your learning process. The order of the lessons. The order of the lessons isn't necessarily logical or scientific, in my opinion. They are based off of tradition, usually. We go from concepts like the basics to intermediate concepts like the past tense, the future tense, the subjunctive tense, and then to advanced concepts like colloquialisms or something like that. Real life doesn't necessarily happen in that order. Real life happens with all of the concepts all at once, and classroom learning doesn't really take that into account. It gives you the lessons in the order that they are traditionally taught in. There is a concept in the comprehensible input school of thought that there is a natural order in which you acquire grammar structures. And I think I actually buy into this one, because while I was in the classroom, there were some grammar structures that you might see as advanced that kind of just clicked. I was ready for them. But there were other ones that no matter how hard I tried or studied them, I just could not force myself to use them properly. They just didn't click. And so classroom learning doesn't really take that into account. The engagement. I admit that it is difficult to stay engaged in the classroom setting. Everyone's been to school, everybody knows this. Classes can get boring and it is hard to pay attention. Because one of the ways that I stay engaged in language learning and stay motivated is that I like to engage in things that really interest me naturally, even outside of language learning, like watching a movie or my own hobbies or things like that. In the classroom, when you are talking about things and using example sentences, you're not necessarily learning the language through something that is interesting to you to begin with. Like, it might be about going shopping at the grocery store. There's only so many times you can talk about going shopping at the grocery store before it gets boring. Traditional classrooms are not one-on-one. Not all of the time is for you. The classroom time is spent for other students' needs as well. So you might hear a lot of other students' questions that you maybe already know the answer to. And you might hear other students having to work through their own troubles and confusion points in the classroom. However, I'm going to add in here that this can also be a good thing, because it has actually been really refreshing being able to make friends that are also really interested in language learning, and hang outside of the classroom and kind of geek out about this stuff as well. So that's a positive and a negative, I guess. Cost. Traditional classes usually cost money. This is life. It sucks. That's a huge negative. There's nothing really else to say about that. Okay, so that's the breakdown of the class that I took and the breakdown of the disadvantages and advantages that I noticed while I was taking the French class. So let's take a look at my progress now. At the end of my class, my teacher was nice enough to have a little one-on-one conversation with me that I got to record, and I think it gives a pretty good idea of where I'm at. Keep in mind that there are errors on my part. My teacher does help me out a little bit, and when I subtitle it will be subtitles of things that I meant to say, not of what I actually said, just so that you get what we're talking about. But just so you know, I know that there's errors in what you're about to see. But before I play that, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Remember, while I was taking this class, I was actually in Paris. Hearing and speaking French out on the street was unavoidable. That's important. I was also staying with a host family. That is tons of input and practice outside of the classroom as well. And then remember, if you have seen my last video, I studied for 8 months on my own before this class started. So when you watch this video and get an idea of my progress, it is not the progress from 1 month of classroom study. It is the accumulation of all of that. That is an important caveat.
Ça sera très utile parce que mon dernière vidéo, c'était seulement moi à parler à la caméra avec moi-même.
Ok.
Avec cette vidéo, j'ai pu avoir des choses que je ne comprenais pas.
Ok. Avant.
Oui, ouais. Exactement. Donc, parce que les choses plus difficiles pour moi, c'est entendre en fait.
C'est la compréhension.
Comprendre la compréhension orale.
Ok.
Oui. Dans mes études à moi-même.
Quand tu as étudié toi-même.
Quand j'ai étudié à moi-même, avant que je suis arrivé à Paris, la plupart de mes études étaient lire.
D'accord. Ok.
Je lis beaucoup de son petite histoire pour les apprentissages.
Il me
manquait l'entraînement de mes oreilles.
D'accord, oui, pour justement déchiffrer le français.
Déchiffrer,
c'est comme pour les hiéroglyphes. Tu sais, quand les Égyptiens, quand tu vois des inscriptions, par exemple, tu vas déchiffrer, c'est-à-dire que tu vas dire ça veut dire ça.
Déchiffrer. Oui, exactement. Français, c'était autre chose complètement.
Mais l'espagnol t'aide peut-être avec le français, parce que comme l'espagnol c'est latin, ça peut peut-être aussi t'aider, ça ressemble beaucoup, certains mots.
Il y a beaucoup, un peu des avantages qui viennent de l'anglais, être mon langue maternelle, et il y a beaucoup d'avantages de l'espagnol. Mais la prononciation des deux sont pas.
Oui, c'est différent.
Après,
ça ressemble plus à l'espagnol qu'à l'anglais pour la prononciation. Pour le français, je sais pas. Qu'est-ce que tu penses, toi?
Oui, mais quand je lis, c'est plus facile de lire l'espagnol parce que j'ai pu voir les lettres et j'ai dit les lettres.
Oui, c'est vrai.
Le français, c'est pas le cas.
C'est vrai, non, c'est pas le cas. Parce qu'il y a des choses qui se prononcent et des choses qui se prononcent pas, et c'est plus difficile.
C'est très, très difficile.
De ne pas se sentir à l'aise.
Oui, le sentiment d'être mal à l'aise avec la langue. Et je suis content que j'ai fait ça parce que je suis aujourd'hui que je peux faire en phase.
Nice camera work, bro. Anyways, I'll tell you what I think and you please tell me what you think. I'm pretty stoked about my progress, but notice that I didn't really become a super French speaker in 1 month. 1 month of classroom learning and pretty much engaging with French in the rest of my time as well. Nearly 24/7, but not quite, you know what I mean? As much as I possibly could. So 1 month of progress is 1 month of progress. The sheer reality of it is that these things take time. Your brain doesn't learn as fast as you want it to, or at least as fast as I want mine to. So there is no secret shortcut. I'm not a language god, I'm a language mortal. And many of you out there might also be language mortals. So you need to know what 1 month of progress looks like in real life. So even though that I learn at a fairly average pace, I still really like doing it. So in a month, I'll make 1 month more of progress. In 2 months, I'll make 2 months more of progress. And eventually, I'll see drastic results for as long as I continue to study French. And hopefully you will too, with whatever language you're learning. So that was the traditional classroom language learning unscientific experiment. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Please let me know if you want to add anything, and if I missed anything, please let me know of your experience too. Love to hear and read about it.